The mindset of the 21st century is different than the mindset of the 20th. It's the mindset of the 20th was different than the 19th. We're rethinking everything. We're rethinking education. We're rethinking business. We're rethinking politics. We're rethinking medicine and healing and food. And religion and spirituality is just one more thing where we're going, okay, what were we given from the past that's good, that's helpful, that we'll take with us? And what needs a real deep rethinking? And where do we need to cut the cord with what was?
Well, hello there, and welcome to a very special episode of The Terri Cole Show. I am talking to Marianne Williamson about the state of the world and her new book, The Mystic Jesus, The Mind of Love. And in this conversation, many of you know who Marianne is. I'm going to talk a little bit about her in case you don't. But for more than 4 decades, Marianne Williamson has been a leader of spirituality in progressive circles. She's the author of 16 books, 4 of which have been #1 New York Times bestsellers. And a quote from the mega bestseller, A Return to Love, which is the book that I read that introduced me to her work. Our deepest fear, this is the quote, our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. And it goes on. Right. And that quote itself is considered kind of an anthem for a contemporary generation of seekers. And I do in some ways consider myself in that category because I specifically remember when I read A Return to Love and that quote in there, and I can go on about the quote. And in fact, I'll probably put it in the show notes. I remember I would print it out and hand it to my therapy clients. 15 years ago when I read this, I was like, remember that it's your right to take up space and your light is the thing that gives other people permission to shine their light. And anyway, so a lot of the work, especially the early work of Marianne, really spoke to me and where I was in my life. And it was like this very hopeful messaging. And what she's doing in this book is basically taking it's more talking about the mystic Jesus rather than the traditional historic, like it's reclaiming the lessons that there are to learn from what we hear about Jesus, because it seems like this figure, this historic figure, has been co-opted. So I see it as learning and applying to modern life some of this ancient wisdom. And a lot of it is influenced by A Course in Miracles. So, I just invite you to listen and enjoy this episode of The Terri Cole Show with an open mind and an open heart. Even if you're not Christian, even if you're not Jewish, even if this sort of isn't your thing, I think that there will be something in here for you. At least I hope that you enjoy it. Super excited to welcome Marianne Williamson to The Terri Cole Show. Hello, Marianne. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's an honor. Thank you for having me.
Sure thing. We've been trying to get it together back and forth, lots of different things. So I really am super psyched for this conversation. I want to start with, and I'm sure, Marianne, that lots and lots of people who interview you tell you this, but your work has been very instrumental in my own work as a therapist, as someone who wanted to be of service to other people. And actually, long before I actually became a therapist and started doing this work, I was reading your books and was very influenced by so much of it. And yes, our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure is something that, literally the whole entire thing years ago, I would print it out and give it to therapy clients and be like, remember this truth. It's okay to shine. It's okay. So anyway.
Thank you. It's an honor to hear you say those things, and I appreciate the acknowledgement. Thank you so much.
Sure. Okay. So I'd love to sort of start with like your history, your life. There's a lot of this that's very public and people know about it, but I'm interested from where you sit. If you were a Marvel movie character, like the origin story, what is your origin story that got you where you are now? Like what inspired you to want to help other people?
When I hear a question like that, we're all different people, obviously. None of us are better or worse than anyone else. The Course in Miracles says all of the children of God are special and none of the children of God are special. So I come from a middle-class Jewish family. I had a very typical growing up in certain ways. my father and my mother were both very service-oriented people.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I went through in my college years is what everybody was going through at that time of counterculture.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I simply began to mature as everyone does. So I think if there's anything interesting about my human origin story,
Mm-hmm.
it's that it's on a certain level garden variety. I think it's what happens inside us where our origin is all the same. I think my soul has always yearned for something more than what we see here, but I think everybody's does.
Mm-hmm.
So the origin story that most interests me now is our origin in something higher and bigger than ourselves, and what we're all yearning for in ways that don't make us different. No, but everybody has a story.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are, wow, that could be a movie, or wow, that could be a, book character or something. But at some deeper level, somebody whose external story might not seem like much has the same things going on.
Mm-hmm. Right. There's a sameness. So with the book, your latest book that came out in May of 24, The Mystic Jesus, The Mind of Love is the name of the new book. So I'm curious, I want to talk about the book, but also what inspired, why that book and why this year?
Well, you mentioned earlier, a paragraph from my book, A Return to Love. You mentioned that one paragraph that's become well known. I always say to people, if you like the paragraph, you'll love the book. There's so many paragraphs. It's just one of many things in there that are reflections of the principles of A Course in Miracles.
Yeah.
This book, in a way, is a sequel to that. It talks about the same principles in many ways, but it talks about them within the context of the character of Jesus, which I have found being in the higher consciousness and personal growth and transformational community has been almost a verboten topic. We don't go there. Now, I'm Jewish, so I don't have anything on it. It just wasn't the book we read.
Right.
And so for me as a Jew, it's almost been more odd. Why is it okay to talk about Buddha?
Right.
Why is it okay to talk about Krishna? Why is it okay to talk about Indian gurus? I just thought it was a weird omission. And I understand it, of course, because the institutional organized religion of Christianity has in many ways, not in all cases, but in many cases, so narrowed the image of Jesus, as the Course in Miracles says, some bitter idols have been made of him who came only to be brother to the world. He has become like something in a musty glass case inside an old museum. And when I read the Course in Miracles, first of all, the language being Christ-centered language, as a Jew, I was like, oh no, this, I don't read this. And then very quickly you realize it's not a religion.
Right.
It's a spiritual system, self-study system of psychotherapy, where it's a dismantling of a thought system based on fear and the acceptance instead of a thought system based on love. It talks about Jesus, but not a Jesus that can be monopolized by any religion. Not as the historical figure who lived 2,000 years ago and who definitely did. This is not to in any way disrespect that story or the religion that has been built up. It's simply to say that we are living at a time on the earth where we're not only at the beginning, and we're no longer even at the beginning of the 21st century. We're into it. It's time to start thinking like it.
Right.
The mindset of the 21st century is different than the mindset of the 20th. It's the mindset of the 20th was different than the 19th. We're rethinking everything. We're rethinking education. We're rethinking business. We're rethinking politics. We're rethinking medicine and healing and food. And religion and spirituality is just one more thing where we're going, okay, what were we given from the past that's good, that's helpful, that we'll take with us? And what needs a real deep rethinking? And where do we need to cut the cord with what was? As civilization individuates, groups individuate just like an individual does. So the issue of the authorship of A Course in Miracles and the role of Jesus in it was always interesting to me. But The Course in Miracles is not trying to get us to believe in God. It's not trying to get us to believe in Jesus. The Course says belief is ultimately meaningless, but a universal experience is both possible and necessary. So it was actually my publisher who approached me with the idea of this book. And they said, we keep hearing from booksellers that people come in asking for books about Jesus that are not necessarily tied to the Christian religion. And I, in my whole 40-year career, my career has been, the denomination called the unchurched. But a lot of people reject, and understandably, the doctrines, the dogma of many organized religious institutions. Just don't want anything to do with that. But then walk away and go, wait a minute, I threw away the baby with the bathwater.
Right.
I didn't mean to disconnect from God. I meant to disconnect from that dogma and doctrine that I'm not so sure I think even is a true reflection of a loving God. That's where books like The Course in Miracles come in. And this is a book like A Return to Love, which dives deeply into the material there. And in this case, the role of Jesus as an internal teacher, as an evolutionary elder brother, and as a spiritual force of consciousness, non-exclusive. The Course says he's not the only name on that door.
Right.
And that can be related to is as a force of consciousness without specific religious connotations.
Yes, I do think that it's been, Jesus Christ as the figure has been co-opted by Christianity. And so those of us in any kind of a public life, I mean, you're doing the brave thing, I think, in sort of bringing this to the fore and talking about what does it mean and how can we relate to, like, why not the wisdom, the material, whatever it is that there is for us to gain from. Because there's almost this knee-jerk reaction, and I have it myself, of like not wanting to, when you're in a public life, be talking about this as a religion, or like, you know what I mean? Like you know that there's going to be people, whatever side, whatever thing you talk about, someone is going to have some kind of a problem with it. But I feel like religion itself becomes this very polarizing situation. So I love that you're bringing in a conversation that's like not about that. It's about the wisdom.
But I think you're also pointing to something that's very problematic in our country. I remember somebody saying to me once when I entered someplace, and he said, okay, we're not going to talk about religion or politics, okay? And I thought, well, that leaves me out at dinner. Americans are left to feeling the only thing we're permitted to discuss is basically pablum. People are so afraid to have any real deep, authentic conversations in this country about things that matter in anything other than the most private settings. And so you go to therapy to have, can I get real? Can I get deep?
Yeah,
but
I think there's some truth to that, yeah.
Real and deep shouldn't be just for 1 hour a week.
Right.
And it's almost dystopian.
Yeah, and the polarization, and I think that this coming back together in this, what you're talking about, is having more of a unified experience where can we have a conversation? Can we get more real with the people in our lives? And if we can't, what is it that we're talking about? Like, how do we want to live? At least that's what this conversation and reading all the stuff that you have here is bringing up for me.
Well, I think nonviolent communication skills.
Yeah.
And also people who have awakened to the fact that we have got to get out of our silos.
Yeah.
This is insane at this point. You're only going to talk to people who you already know agree with you about everything. The polarization, I think there are millions and millions of people of goodwill who don't really only want to talk to people who agree with us about religion or spirituality or politics or anything else, but are almost afraid to go there in certain situations because you don't know what people are going to say. I was at a Rosh Hashanah dinner the other night, but not everybody at the table was Jewish. And it wasn't about religion, but rather it was about politics, that there was a real divergence. And we were like yelling at each other. And it was like, you know what it was? It was a fun dinner party.
Yeah.
It was no, yes, no, you're doing that. No, yes. And then at the end, one gentleman said, well, which one of us is right? I said, we're both right. We both get to be right. This is America. Nobody has a monopoly on truth. Nobody owes it to you to agree with you. And, if you think that only you know truth, nobody else has anything to add to contribute to your thinking.
Right.
What kind of life is that? The unity comes from the fact that they have a right to an opinion. And this goes into the Course and the spiritual.
Yes.
We have been trained, and that's really the message of the Course in Miracles, is that we've been trained since a very young age to judge, to attack, to defend, rather than to love and to embrace. And that's really the core message of Jesus, isn't it? To love. And then even in our field, love yourself. We've become more into loving ourselves and loving each other. It's getting ridiculous at this point. The Course in Miracles says, do not look to yourself to find yourself, for you're not there. You're not in isolation. Our ultimate identity is in relationship. And so to me, Jesus and others are guides to that deeper ability to be present when another person is just existing in your presence and wishing them well and thinking less about what you're going to get from this, more about who you're going to be in the space so that another person feels permitted and even encouraged to speak their truth and shine.
Right on.
That namaste consciousness. And whether it's Jesus or any other practice, spiritual, religious, secular, whatever it is, in every area of our lives, we're losing out tremendously because we're afraid to speak to one another.
So from the book, can you give us some examples of metaphysical, psychotherapeutic interpretations of traditional Christian terms?
Okay, throw one out and I'll tell you.
So being saved.
Excellent. Okay. There's only one thing to be saved from, our own fear-based thinking, because every thought has an effect. Every thought has an effect, right?
Yep.
So the world, A Course in Miracles says, is dominated by a thought system based on fear. And the message of the Course in Miracles is that we can dismantle that thought system based on fear and accept instead a thought system based on love. When we are caught in that thought system based on fear, based on the belief that we're separate from one another, and we maintain that a sense of separation by attacking each other, defending, thinking I'm better than you, thinking I'm worse than you, thinking your ethnicity or your sex or sexuality or nationality makes you different, rather than realizing our oneness, that produces depression and anxiety called hell. That's the metaphysical meaning of hell, not later, right now. Salvation is save me from this way of thinking that I'm so locked into.
Yes. Okay. So what about righteousness? What about the things that we do to be righteous?
Righteous means right use. Right use of the mind means that I'm here to love you and not to judge you or blame you. I'm here to forgive you rather than hold on to this grievance against you. I'm here to support you rather than undermine you. That's righteousness. I'm here to try to be the best person that I can be in any situation.
Love it. What about the notion of, and I think this is more Catholicism than Christianity, but original sin?
Okay. Another interesting one. So sin, this is my favorite game after all, because this is really what all this is about. There's an archery term, sin. It means you missed the mark. So this is a little more multi-layered. The Course in Miracles says that you are thought and the mind of God, and that God is perfect. Therefore, nothing in his mind can be imperfect. That means you are on the spiritual level of your ultimate identity. You are perfect as you are. In this world, it gets complicated. Truth is simple. Living on this planet is very complicated. We all get confused. And we all have moments when, due to our wounds, due to our triggers, due to our past, whatever, we don't in that instant know how to love and get our needs met. So we disconnect. Even Freud said that this neurosis, can be used in the service of the neurosis, that there's a disconnection from self, and our own intelligence can be used in the service of the neurosis. When we disconnect from love, we say something unkind. We go into a situation and we're selfish. We're something other than love. That is a miscreation and a misuse of the mind. Now, God doesn't see that as a sin to punish you for, because God sees you as you really are, which is a perfect, innocent child. That file cannot be deleted from the computer of your mind, because what God creates is eternal and indestructible. So God doesn't see it as a sin he would punish by sending you to hell. The part of the mind, the ego, fear-based mind that led you to act that way, led you to hell because of the remorse and the guilt and the pain that you feel because of its consequences. God sees that as a mistake to correct, not as a sin to punish. And that in the Course in Miracles is called the difference between sin and error. You made a mistake.
Right.
I sinned is an entirely different metaphysical and psychological construct than I made a mistake. I can atone from my mistake. I can make amends from my mistake, and I can try to be a better person now.
Is there any good ones that I missed that you can think of?
How about Christ?
Yes. How about
and
that?
Holy Spirit.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Which one? This is like a fun game. It's like we're on a TV talk show or something.
Holy Spirit. Let's start there.
Holy Spirit. Okay. So the Course in Miracles says, so that's going to actually bring in the Christ, interestingly enough. So the Course in Miracles says, as I mentioned already, that we are ideas in the mind of God, and an idea cannot leave its source. So you are the extension of love on this earth. That is who you are. But living on this earth, which is dominated by a thought system that tells you are who you aren't, and that you aren't who you are, we disconnect. Now, what is that essential self that is the truth of who we all are? One word for that is the Christ. Carl Jung, the Swedish psychologist, said if you go deep enough into your mind and deep enough into mine, that there is mental imagery we all share, which he called archetypes, right?
Yep.
The notion of the Christ mind is, if you take it one step further, not only are there mental images or archetypes in you and in me that we share, if you go deep enough into your mind and mine, there's only one mind. It's like the spokes on a wheel. We identify with the rim, but if you take them all down to the center point, the hub, there's only one point that's the real origin story that I was referring to. That's the real origin story, which is the truth of who we are. And the yearning of life is to get back to the truth of who we are. In that moment of disconnection, which the Course in Miracles says occurred millions of years ago, although in reality it never even occurred, because only love is real, but it's a hallucination that is as powerful in their effects as is the truth, and that's three-dimensional reality. In that moment, God, being perfect, has the answer to every problem the moment the problem occurs. But love would not force you back to love, because love does not force. In that moment, the Course says, God created an alternative in your consciousness that is a gentle bridge of perception, an internal guide in any moment. Oh my God, I'm not at peace. Something's going on here. Something's loveless. I did the wrong thing, or I'm feeling bad, or I don't know how to fix this, or blah, blah, blah. The only real problem is that you're separated from the truth of who you are, because the universe works like a GPS. You took the wrong path out of loving thought, it'll recalibrate. Just return right then. And that's what the Holy Spirit is. Be still and know. Recalibrate. Now, all the great religious systems, these are not truths. There's one truth spoken in many different ways. So you could name any of the great religious or spiritual traditions. These same principles are presented just in different language.
Yes. It's interesting that you said that, because I was thinking, I've done quite a bit extensive studying with Deepak Chopra over the last 30 years. And I was thinking, when you were talking, there was a lot of what you were saying that was making me think about, Deepak would talk about this from the point of view of the illusion of separateness.
Well, that's the language of the Course. That this world of disconnection is an illusion, and it is based on the idea that we're separate from each other. You're over there and I'm over here. And that's Course language, that the only real problem, when you talked about original sin, the meaning of original sin is the original thought that we are separate.
Yeah. Oof.
The original thought that we are separate. And because illusions are as powerful in their effects as is the truth, and every thought has an effect, all kinds of evidence for our separation is presented to us in every moment. My thought tells me I don't even know where you are. California, are you? I don't know where you are, Terry. Where
New
are
York.
you? Okay, you're in New York. I'm in Washington, D.C. I mean, this material world obviously exists. The message of the spirit is that beyond this world, beyond this world of the ultimately destructible, the world of the body, there was a truer world in which all of us are one, which, by the way, is another place where the language of the Course in Miracles is so different than traditional Christianity. Most traditional Christians look at the line, there is only one begotten Son, and take it to mean Jesus is the only begotten Son.
Yes.
But from a Course or miracle-minded perspective, there's only one begotten Son means we're all in.
Right.
Because there's no place where you stop and I start. There's only one of us here.
Right.
That's why if I attack you, I'm attacking myself. The Course says if I have a judgmental thought towards you, imagine a sword dropping on your head. And no, it's actually dropping on mine.
Right. So is the message of Jesus, is it as simple as being more loving?
Well, it goes back to something I said earlier. You could say yes, but life is complicated.
Yeah.
So to say that it's simple, love one another, the rubber meets the road when it comes to the human condition and the human experience. The Course in Miracles says enlightenment begins as an abstract understanding. Yes, love, forgive, love mercy, do justice, walk humbly with thy God, as it says in Judaism. Yes. However, the Course says, then you take a journey without distance from the head to the heart. You and I are talking right now, and you're being kind, and you're being respectful. Therefore, my staying, loving, goodwill, all this is easy enough. It's easy enough with people who are being nice to you.
Yeah.
The issue of love one another is, how did you do in that situation where it wasn't so easy? And that's what life is. Life is the Course in Miracles says each of us has a highly individualized curriculum. Where we are constantly, it's like kids in school. You're all, the teacher is always going to give you a lesson a little bit beyond what you've already achieved. And that's how you grow. And that's how life is. Life doesn't always respect your comfort zones. And in some ways it busts your comfort zones. And that is the work of the Holy Spirit. The universe is intentional. And it's always, it's a gentle nudge, and sometimes not such a gentle nudge, to be better and do better than you're doing now. The Course in Miracles says, because when you were talking about righteousness, the Course in Miracles talks about right-minded thinking, which is loving thought, and that any loveless thought is a miscreative use of the mind. Free will means you can do that, but what you don't have the power to do is diminish the power of your thought to manifest. So the Course says there is a limit beyond which the Son of God cannot miscreate. That's what's happening on the planet right now. We can't continue like this. The evolutionary stage that we are at is unsustainable for the survival of the human race. And that's why, as individuals, as we're going through all this, we are upping our capacity to be used not only as individuals, but in relationship with one another to heal the changes that need to be made, literally, for our species to survive.
Yes. All right. So in mystical terms, what is the crucifixion and what is the resurrection? Because these are such prominent themes.
Okay. Crucifixion, there is the loving mind, the Holy Spirit. And then there is the mind that has separated from love. And that in the Course is called ego. Now, I know that that's not the way all psychotherapists use it. For instance, I had an early therapist in my life talked about the positive ego and the negative ego. This is using it the way the ancient Greeks used it, which is the notion of the small separated self. Now, this is the thing. Remember when I said that Freud said intelligence will be used in the service of the neurosis? The part of my mind that believes it's separate, inertia means the tendency of the object to move in whatever direction it's been moving. There is no such thing as a neutral thought, the Course says. So if I'm not proactively seeking to love you, the mental energy that I am withholding from a loving experience with you will then be used in the service of fear. That's why the Course says every thought you think takes you and those around you straight to heaven or straight to hell. Hell and heaven not being something afterwards, after we die, but right here, right now. When I'm loving, it'll be peaceful. When I'm not loving, it will not be peaceful. And that is what the crucifixion is. It's what the ego mind would make of any situation. It's self-sabotage, attack of others, attack of self, and it externalizes in the things we go through in life that are painful. But our consciousness, once again, there was that 3 days between the crucifixion and the resurrection, just like there was the 40 years in the journey from slavery to the promised land of the Israelites in the Old Testament. That 40 years, that 3 days means you're going through the crucifixion now. You're sick. You're going through a divorce. You're bankrupt. You're whatever the horrifying pain is. But your consciousness while on the cross, while in a phase of crucifixion, will determine how long it takes to get to the resurrection, which is a return to your righteous thought, sane thought, and ultimately inner peace. Some people want to hang on to that cross, you know. He divorced me 25 years ago, but I still haven't forgiven the bastard. Well, the universe would love to give you new love and new relationships, but your grievance that you're holding on to is deflecting the miracle. And that's why forgiveness is the key to everything. So resurrection is the new beginning. Resurrection is the fact that the universe will recalibrate, will right itself. But once again, I'm not saying it's always easy. We have to honor our human emotions. Jesus wept. We have to honor the time in the tomb. But on the other hand, what's really amazing is when the women went to get the body from the cave, from the tomb, they were told by angels, he is not here. He has risen. That is so brilliant psychologically, because what that means is you're not going to even be the same person you were before you went through that. You're the you that was hurt like that. The resurrection is that's not even who I was. That's not who I even am anymore. I mean, the psychological dynamics in all of those stories are just so beyond amazing.
What I love about the book and about what you're doing is that there's a lot of hope. And I think that you have, in your own way, with the books that you've written over the many years, 16 books I think you have, maybe more, it's like people are looking for hope and looking for the possibility of the resurrection of, for us in the U.S., the country itself, but a lot of people personally too. And I think that going through the pandemic, there's a lot of things that we've been through that have been very heavy. And I feel like this is a time for hope. So you guys, if you are listening, if you are watching, the book is The Mystic Jesus, The Mind of Love by the great Marianne Williamson. Marianne, tell us what you're excited about right now. Like, what are you excited about?
What am I excited about? I don't think I'm excited right now.
So what are you?
Well, first of all, I've had to do my own healing work after having been through a very brutal experience. And I'm very concerned about our country. I'm very concerned about the world. There's a part in the Course where it says the purpose of your life is to be happy. So I understand when I'm at the highest level, there's a quiet kind of mature joy that isn't necessarily excited. You know, we have this happy, cheap yellow smiley face thing. And if you're not happy, suppress it, nullify it, all the stuff that you, I'm sure, know well in your line of work. But I think that there's a kind of grown-up joy, a grown-up joy at being alive, a grown-up happiness at seeing my little 16-month-old grandbaby that I get when my daughter sends me the videos or the pictures, or I see her on FaceTime, or friends call, or people who love you. You know, obviously I'm a human being. I love to be loved and I love to love and all that. But it's a more sober happiness. And I can appreciate, even like when I said about watching my 16-month-old granddaughter, right? I had a conversation with my daughter's mother-in-law because we were both finding ourselves just gazing at the baby. She said, yeah, it's called granny gazing. Because when you're a young parent, you're busy.
Yeah, right.
You're just busy. Is she okay? Is he okay? If they eat, the diaper needs to be changed. But when you're a grandmother, you just, So yes, that's what brings me joy, is seeing things and that are an expression of the human spirit. But it's excited. It's a different word.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
It sure does. And I super appreciate you spending all this time with us today. So thank you for everything that you've done, Marianne. I really do appreciate your big, beautiful brain. You guys, the book is The Mystic Jesus, The Mind of Love.
Thank you so much.